Ladies and gentlemen, we are here with question and answer, I believe, number 5. All right. So, question number 1 for the black belts is, without winning major tournaments, how will you now measure advancement through the belts under COVID? So, the floor is open.
I think through the belts is a little bit of a wide spectrum. I think just measuring progress is a combination of writing things down that you're like. I think the first step is to get a notebook and write down, maybe, or even just talk to your coach about what you're not good at or what you need to work on, and then set a plan to work on maybe one area, maybe 2 areas, maybe 2 different guards, and work on them, and then see how, and keep track of your progression of how effective you can pull it off in sparring, and even just how smooth it is in drilling, and then just break it down piece by piece. It's the same process as just regular mastery of the sport, in which you figure out your weaknesses, you work on them, talk to your coach about it, ask questions, and record your progress, and you should be able to do that yourself. Tournaments obviously help, but right now we just have to work with what we have. So that's what I think, is just notes, keep track of your progression, talk to your coach, and continue to train with a purpose and show up to practice.
The question, to clarify, is not how do I, the student, measure advancement. They're asking you, the instructor. How are the instructors going to measure the progress of the student under COVID since there are no major tournaments?
This the same way we always did. Just observing your student's role in drill. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, there weren't major tournaments on the East Coast. There's not fewer people even then went to major tournaments.
Yeah.
Managed to get promoted then.
Yeah, we had a spirited conversation about 10 minutes ago about this question. This is a great question. So we have never used, major tournaments as a measuring point for success. However, certain groups of people do enter themselves into those tournaments. So, that just becomes another unit of measurement to help. But when that goes away, it's not like we're scrambling to figure out how to fill that gap. We're still vigilant on our students and the progress. If you as a student are feeling like maybe you're not getting the same amount of attention, then, always have that communication with your instructor. You should always be talking to your instructor and your coach about how you're progressing after class, little tweaks and details of the movements. Everybody should be videotaping themselves too while they're practicing, and then always comparing your film from weeks, before to future weeks. So, there's a lot of different things that are gonna help you and help the coaches, see that you're progressing. But first and foremost, the number one thing you have to do is just get on the mats. Like, we're still training during COVID. We're still able to offer our services, under a wide variety of different things, like contact, no contact. Now, it does throw a little bit of a wrench in our normal workflows of things, but this does not stop progression. It really doesn't. So I definitely understand how, like, you throw a curveball at you, like, man, they're not really able to measure us like they used to be able to, but that's not the case. Even though it might seem like that, it's really not. So just do your due diligence of getting into class and training, and also talking to the coach.
Cool. Yeah, I promoted kid to yellow belt just because I was watching him, and he was already doing okay, but they didn't compete since February, and I was just watching him, and he's training with yellow and orange belts, and he was just getting better and doing better, so he moved up to yellow from gray, and so it's just like they said, it's the same way that we've always done it.
Some of our very first black belts, Malcolm never competed. He very rarely competed, and most of his training was mental reps, driving from his 2-hour drive from wherever he lives into Crazy 88 a couple times a week. So you can still progress. Don't try to limit yourself just because of what's going on around us. It's important to just kind of stay in it and stay in the mix.
Cool. Next question. What are strategies for training through injuries? I'm not sure if the individual means like training through injuries, like, taping your hands or something, or if they mean like, how should I address injuries, if I'm injured or something like that.
Yeah, so if you're injured, number one, first and foremost, you got to get that fixed. Injury, talking broken bone, talking torn ligament, something that might require a cast surgery, maybe even like a significant amount of stitches, that you definitely couldn't train if you have, a lot of stitches. So those things are going to require healing time. Now, what type of healing time? So that's something that your doctor and orthopedic surgeon is going to be able to help you with, and that's probably going to involve something like physical, PT, physical therapy, and like a set amount of time completely off of training. Now if you do find yourself into that category where you're like seriously injured, then the only thing that you can do in terms of training martial arts is to come in and watch, take notes, and then it's really important to do that, because if you do sustain a serious injury, you're talking like sometimes 6 months at the, talking on the longer end, ACL, blown out ACL. You really have to try to stay on your routine. So if you're coming in 3 times a week, stay on that routine. Don't don't say, okay, well, I'll come back after I nurse this injury. Believe it or not, regular life and everything is going to fill those slots of whatever you were doing to come in. So keep martial arts in your life. Look at it from a different angle, be more analytical, watch more film, do what you can do until you can come back onto the mats. Now, when you're hurt, we're talking sprained fingers, sprained toes, things like that, where you can kind of tape up, where you can wear a knee or elbow brace and come in, and sometimes you might be going to a patient first or a doctor to check it out. And they might be, if you're not going to a super serious sports doctor, they're going to be like, hey, take 4 to 6 weeks off and then come see me. So when you get diagnosis like that, that's kind of where you're going to have to see, like, okay, I'm going to come to class, I'm going to get my gi on, I'm going to do the warm-ups, see how I feel through the warm-ups, and I'm just going to do the drilling portion and not spar. And then you kind of go from there and then kind of work your way back into sparring or turn the intensity up. But, the good thing about martial arts, is especially jiu-jitsu, is you can kind of come in, go through the warm-up, and then do like an hour of drilling, and it's going to be pretty low impact. So the most important thing is being able to diagnose between, are you hurt or are you injured? If you're injured, go get it checked out, and then your doctor is going to be able to help you kind of come up with a game plan back onto the mat. Sorry.
That's okay. I would say if you're beyond the major injuries, when you're back to the point of sparring, it's a good idea to grab more advanced guys, because they're not going to rip your head off and take advantage of your sore shoulder. They can let you work a little more safely, or your knee or your wrist or whatever is minor sprain, strain. The advanced guys can work a little more with it.
Yeah, now getting a little more specific into it, the first thing is that whatever your diagnosis is, when you follow John's advice, is to let the coach know, and then if you are going to spar, is to let your partner know. Especially, higher belts are very respectful, and even if they just see something taped, a lot of upper belts here will ask you what's wrong. So make sure your coach knows and that your partner knows what is wrong. And then obviously once you know what injury it is, figure out what positions aggravate and hurt it and avoid that. So if you're, like right now I'm dealing with a wrist and a rib, so sitting up hurts, so I try to, anytime we're doing any sit-up motion, I make sure I take my time and go slow. I'm not doing takedowns right now because I know it's going to irritate the rib, so now I'm just pulling guard. I can pass, but I have to pass a certain way. So knowing what aggravates it is a big thing, and then avoiding that, doing your best to do so. And then with my wrist, it's kind of hard to get the grip, so I had it all taped up. Made sure I took my time, got the tape on my finger, on my wrist, and then I was very careful with any of the grips that I had. Sometimes you are just going to aggravate it by accident, but if you aggravate it, then you have to make a decision. Are you going to keep going and pushing through it, or is it time to take a round off? What I do when I'm hurt is I'll go every other round. That way I still get some cardio in and I can still work, but I can do a hard round, take one off, watch the rest, watch the sparring round, and then go. I did that today. I think I actually did 3 out of 4 rounds, but I took one off just to heal myself, let myself refresh, and then I got back in and I felt okay. So avoiding the things that aggravate it, knowing your limits, don't push too hard, and then making sure that your coach and your partner knows what the issue is, and then just do as much as you can, but don't push yourself too hard.
For me, the advice that I would give is behavioral, just like John said. It's super important that if you are unable to train, that you allocate the same training time to martial arts. Like what we tell to the athletes is, if you want your recovery process to be as easy as possible, the best scenario would be for you to, like, let's say you train at 7 o'clock, is for you to go do your PT at 7 o'clock. Like, or if you're or just come into the gym at 7. We did a couple of the guys actually would do that. Like they get in the car and they come to the gym at 7 o'clock, their normal training time, and they hang out at the gym so that they don't fill that schedule. Basically what we notice is that anybody who fills that time that they normally would be training with something else has a very hard time coming back, because
derail so many jiu-jitsu journeys.
Yep.
So
and
many.
Yeah, like you get used to, like, okay, I can't do jiu-jitsu, so what I'm gonna do at 7 o'clock is I'm gonna go do like, I don't know, like pottery, wine and pottery
Hang
during
out
those
with my
times.
family or something like that.
Right,
I
so
mean, it's
now-
good, but not martial arts.
Now 6 months later, you're ready to come back, but now it's not just about coming back to jiu-jitsu, it's about canceling the pottery time, and you've spent 6 months being friends with everybody there, and that's an obligation and an activity that you like to do as well. So that's number one. The second thing is you have to overcome the mindset that if you're not able to get 100% out of the practice, that you shouldn't come to the practice. So you often hear people say like, well, I don't want to come to the class just to drill. What's the point of me coming to the class? And that's sort of a weird mindset, because you want to come in and you want to get better. And if the question is not training versus coming in and drilling, where you're going to get a little bit better, but it's not possible for you to get as good as you can get, why not just come in and do the practice, right? So you got to get out of that mindset where if it's not the maximum yield, right, that you're going to get out of the practice, you're not going to go. Just come in, get the work that you can get done. Okay.
And if you are gonna go home, because sometimes I stay, sometimes I'll go home. Making sure when you're going home, you're doing what you're supposed to do to heal. So when I go home, I'm not going out and hang out with friends. I go home, I get sleep. That helps. Sleep helps a lot, and I'm icing my hand. I might sit there and watch TV, but I'm icing my hand, icing my knee, whatever I need to, instead of going and doing something else. I take that time. If I need to go home and rest, sleep, lay down, whatever, I'm still icing myself, or taking the ibuprofen if I need to.
Cool. Question 3. As a white belt, where do you draw the line between helping your partner to do the technique you're drilling versus asking the instructor to help? If I'm confident in understanding a technique, I'm comfortable helping my partner, but I worry about being disrespectful to the instructor. How should we approach this?
Short, sweet advice, maybe. One or two, like if you're, especially as a white belt, I would say, if you're telling them to do one or two things, put your hand here, your knee there, I think that's okay. But if you don't try to go too deep into it, that's where you ask for help.
I would just go ahead and say, call the coach over, just to say, and that might seem like I'm taking an aggressive stance there, but we call them white belt super conferences, and you see them all the time where it's like one white belt who's been there for 6 months more than all the other white belts. It's like, they're all around him, listening to him, talking about his preferences on how to grip and everything like that. And typically, you should be able to say like, no, put your hand there or hand there. But even so, like, you should be supervised by a coach when you're doing that. So when in doubt, just call the coach over. I think that's the best bet. Because even something as small as a grip in jiu-jitsu, those make big differences, small inches and centimeters. So you could be doing your partner a disservice.
I agree. I think with the confidence that, I think that's subjective too. Because you might think you're confident,
Exactly.
but the coaches don't think that you are, and that's not a knock on anyone. But I agree too. I think it's safer to just call the coach over, even if you have to wait a couple seconds. That waiting a couple seconds for the coach is better than drilling a wrong rep, and giving wrong advice. Even me as a purple, a blue, and brown belt, all those belts, I've tried to help my partner, and sometimes I've gotten it wrong to where I sometimes will say, I think it's this, but let's just wait and call the coach. Even as a brown belt, I was doing that, unless I really knew. As a brown belt, but even still, sometimes I was wrong. So it's always best to call the coach over, because there could be something that you misinterpreted, you heard wrong. Sometimes the person, if you have other people drilling it, they drilled the grip a little bit different than what the coach actually wanted, even if you saw it. So it's really always just best to call the coach up, whoever's running the class, to make sure that you have it. Like I said, I think it's just better to wait a little bit. I wouldn't wait too long, but I would wait, try to get the coach's attention, and that's better than drilling something wrong and starting to form a habit that's wrong.
For me, I have a funny story about this. So actually, this question came in earlier in the week, and literally something happened in the Nogi class when I was on the side that I saw happen, which highlights this situation perfectly. So it was two white belts who were partnered together, and the white belt asked, "What should I do?" And he was on the top of close guard, and the other white belt, who probably had been training for maybe like 3 months, advised him that, when you're on top, you need to do Americana. He said, you reach across the body and you put the guy in Americana. And the guy was like, oh, like this? And they started to do Americana from the top of close guard, which is wrong. But he said it like he was very confident.
Yes.
He knew that was the right answer, even though it's the wrong answer. So my take on this question would be that you should, if it's something like you're just repeating what the instructor said, right? Like the instructor said, hey, grab the guy's wrist, and then your partner's not grabbing the guy's wrist, and you're literally just following the recipe that was laid out. Yeah, say, hey, remember the coach said to grab the guy's wrist. Cool, I think that's fine. But if it's a more general, broad question, like what should I do from here? I think those are very, very dangerous questions to try to answer. And we actually did a poll, and I'm curious what you guys think. So the way that we asked the different belts was, now that you look back, what percentage of the advice that you yourself gave, right, do you think was wrong? So like if you are a purple belt, what advice do you think that you gave that was wrong? Like if you had to give advice, like how wrong was it at each time? So, so I said, man, and so we asked each belt, and I think we said like, well, I'm curious. So let's start like, when you receive advice from a black belt, what percentage of the advice in hindsight do you think could be wrong?
Like I said,
It was
about
low for me, I
3%,
think.
2 or 3%.
2 or 3% black belt? What do you think, John?
What's the question?
The question is like, if you receive advice from a black belt, what's the error rate on the advice that you receive if you're receiving it from a black belt?
Out of my own personal
Legit, yeah.
experiences, a very extremely low, because the black belts I've been around are world renowned.
Let's say
names.
Crazy 88, TLI.
Yeah,
like what?
I mean, the
Lloyd Irvin and Leo Dalla give me advice. It's
I mean,
pretty good.
yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
I've been handcrafted by Julius Park and Lloyd Irvin, so like that's why we're answering these questions so confidently. It's because we've been around for a while. So yeah, I mean the advice that I got from all the browns and black belts while I was coming up was just we're talking like Roddy Ferguson seminar. So we just were exposed to that really early on.
So what
I would say-
percentage number?
Of stuff that was wrong,
Yeah.
like 1%.
Okay.
Probably less than 1%.
Okay. What about brown belts?
No more than 5.
Really?
Yeah. I mean,
I would say for me, when teaching the kids, and when we're saying wrong, I think when it comes to brown and black belts, there's been times where I've showed a technique and then I see you or Keith do it better, and not that I was wrong, but it's an interesting thing of how like jiu-jitsu is evolving. So there's some techniques that can be done more efficiently
less
and done
detail wrong?
better.
Maybe
that's
less
that's
detail.
the like we're saying wrong. You're saying this is going to get you in trouble and cost you a match, or you're just saying like
A different variation to do something, because
Yeah.
there's a lot of those.
because there's been a lot of like advice that I give the kids where, and then maybe a couple months later I'll go, oh guys, this is going to be better. Don't do that don't do the old transition anymore. Let's go ahead and do this and fix it and make it better. I think when it comes to brown and black belts, that's usually I think every once in a while you just say something that maybe is wrong, but there might be a reason. So wrong is, I don't know.
I've
What
never
about a
gotten
blue
negligent
belt?
advice from a brown or a blue belt since I've been here ever.
What blue belt? What
or
about
a
a
brown or a black belt.
What about a blue belt?
it-
If they're getting advice from a, you're saying 50% of what a blue
maybe.
belt
I think
tells
that's
you.
what we ended up saying, about 50.
But sometimes you put people on the spot and they're like, maybe they're afraid to say I don't know. So they make something up on the spot that's potentially.
What do you think, John? For a blue belt, what do you think is if a blue belt's giving advice, what's the chances that the advice is correct?
Yeah, I think it's 50-50.
50-50.
Yeah.
So what are the chances that a white belt's advice is correct?
90.
80-20.
Well, we had the spectrum of like new white belt off the street to phase belt,
Phase
and to
belt.
almost white belt, or
Well,
to almost blue belt.
yeah,
Like
I-
three different.
I think like I would say, just looking back, I was like, what I thought I know, I thought I was pretty, I think that the time when I became the least confident is, or I wouldn't say confident, but you realize how much you don't know. I feel it's like the end of brown and the beginning of black, where you're just like, I know something's pretty good, but there's definitely a lot that I don't know. And I feel like the belt where you're the most confident, but you know the least, I think is purple belt.
That's where when I was like, in the midst of my purple belt run, like I felt extremely confident. I really did feel like At least with the positions that I was doing, I felt like I could teach anybody those positions, and I could do them on, or attempt to do them on anybody in the entire world. And
I mean, to be fair,
Well, that's just because because you're successful.
right,
You're
yeah,
successful.
and it came with that, so, but it's a double-edged sword. You got to be careful with that too, because when you're in that mindset, you could just, you could be making shit up on the fly, and it may not necessarily inherently be completely, like you're like getting somebody in trouble with what you're showing them, but it's just like kind of on the fly maybe.
And to put it in perspective too, when I started, you were a purple belt, and John taught me for maybe I would say you were my coach for. I mean, I went over to Julia's maybe a couple months in, but John was my coach for probably close to 2 years. And we always say that I'm really good at fundamental positions because I came up in the kids class, and that was what John had hammered into us as kids. This was like 2012, 2013, was a lot of fundamental. We learned knee cut, fundamental escapes that were effective. So as a purple belt, I mean, you taught me, I think the kids program was pretty good at the time, and you taught me a lot, where I got a lot out of the kids class, where I was training in John's class until I was like 15 and a green belt, because at that point, I just wanted better training partners. But the class itself, I stayed there for as long as I felt I needed to, because I felt like I was getting a lot. It wasn't anything super fancy, but what he taught, he was confident in as a purple belt, and that brought me all the way to green. So just to put that in perspective.
So purple belt is the one where we're not sure. So we're saying a blue belt is 50-50, brown belt, black belt is here or there, right? It's pretty low. White belt, just unless it's exactly about, it's recollection of exactly what occurred before, like this is the recipe. Hey, remember you're supposed to do this.
Yeah, like, hey, what grip is it? Pistol grip or cat's paw grip? Cat's paw grip. That's what he said, Like, even getting into how that, like, you got to be careful, because I know that you might think you're really feeling yourself and you're feeling a particular movement, and you might be having that, but you're still, like, so early on that it's like so much more to go.
Yep.
It really is.
It's almost cliche to say that, but we say like, oh, every 3 years when you look back, you should be like, man, I was doing a lot of things kind of wrong 3 years ago, and I feel like that never goes away. I notice it about every 3 year intervals. I'm like, don't erase all the footage of stuff I was teaching 3 years ago, So, cool. Question. Similar question. As a blue belt, what advice is okay and not okay to give? What advice is above my pay grade?
I say as a blue belt, just giving advice about experiences you had that turned out well for you. So me, I won the world at blue belt. I mean, I wasn't a blue belt much longer after that, but for me, just even competing, if someone had asked me, oh, how are you not nervous? What kinds of things do you, like, what's your diet like? Because when I was a blue belt, cutting weight and all that was a little easier. So for me, just anything that I was already successful in and was already doing well consistently, I felt like I could give advice on mindset, pre-tournament routines, a little bit of like diet and cutting weight. I wasn't a professional, but I could say, oh, this worked for me, you can try it. So just things that you had already experienced that went well, that were also approved by, I would say, someone above or someone that said, oh, you're doing a good job with that, then you can give that advice. But trying to give wild advice for something that you're not sure of, but you just want to preach and, spit facts is just not effective in any way.
Yeah, this is a really good question, because as a blue belt, you do have to interact with white belts a lot. It's because you're going to be their first line of folks that are pulling them up into that serious group of people and onto that ladder. So you have to be careful of what you say. I agree with Vannessa. So you're going to have a lot of anecdotal evidence and experiences to share with people by the time you get a blue belt. And then also, you're going to have like a really good idea of what the culture of the school is like. So, those are the type of things that you can like spread around to people, your personal experiences, what went well for you, what went bad for you. And then also like, trying to guide people and like, no, we don't do that here. Like, hey, do this like this instead. Like, not really technique wise, but just like kind of behavior wise, you can really help out a lot in trying to like maintain and set the culture, because you're going to be closer to those newer folks coming in, you're going to be more accessible. So that being said, make sure you're like a good representation of what you want them to be like, kind of like our last video.
Yeah, I would just say just things you're, from a technique wise, just things you're really confident in and successful in.
You're saying
cross
things you
choke
would pull off
details.
at the tournament, or
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
just
something
in the
something you
room.
do on the regular. You know, this blue belt knee cuts
Yep.
like crazy. Okay, so you're drilling a knee cut with a white belt. You can add detail to that. You know, but if you're clueless about something, don't try to wing it.
I think the most dangerous advice that the blue belt can give is advice about sort of larger trends or like how a person should so I'll give you an example that I saw recently, like on Reddit, right? It was like on Reddit Jiu-Jitsu, and somebody was asking a blue belt, and the blue belt was saying that you shouldn't watch John Danaher's guy's guard retention, because that guard retention only works for no gi and not for gi, right? So I didn't really analyze the situation and whatever, but that might be true. I don't know. I would have to watch more of Danaher's guys doing no gi and Danaher's guys, whoever does gi. I just think that's a very strange piece of advice to receive and accept, given that the person saying the advice is a blue belt and the other guy is a elite black belt level coach, right? So there could be a method to the madness that the blue belt doesn't understand. I also think blue belt advice about what's going on at black belt is very funny, because there's so many things that you believe when you're a blue belt about what the black belts are doing and things like,
Who's not?
yeah, who's good, who's not, what their training regimen is like, what their sponsorship deals are like. Like when you're a blue belt, you think crazy
If you're
stuff.
watching video, what they're actually trying to do. Oh, he's trying to set this up, and you could be completely wrong.
Yeah.
You know, I remember when I was a blue belt, I was bread cuttering people a lot, you know, so that was like one of the moves that I would, you know, feel confident in teaching. And then one time I went down to Florida to Roberto's school, third law, and he had me teach the bread cutter, and I taught it fucking wrong. You know, after all the, you know, I've done it so many times, and, you know, I was just a blue belt, and after the class, he stared at me like for 10 minutes, and I was like, what? He's like, you taught the thing with the arm in the whole time. You know, I was like, oh, shit. You know, so I mean, you got to be careful when you're a blue belt. You'll still slip up, okay? And just like Julie said, the opinions and the philosophies that you develop, you know, check yourself whenever you're really like buying into it. You're like, I just a blue belt. I gotta relax.
Yep. Cool. I'm not sure what number question this is. So, question: is BJJ effective for self-defense? What is the point of certain moves that do not have what I believe to be practical life applications?
I like this question a lot. This is a question that,
It's all you.
you know, doing sales at a martial arts school for so many years, you run into this all the time. First and foremost, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gi was created to replicate a suit, okay? So right then and there, you know, in real life situations, if you're on the street, you're typically gonna be wearing clothes, you know? Training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in the gi is gonna teach you how to utilize those clothes, you know, plain and simple. A lot of the other martial arts, you know, a lot of people think no gi is gonna be more realistic. You know, I mean, maybe, but, you know, typically not. And also, the second part of the question was, what, can you repeat it?
What is the point of certain moves that do not have what I believe to be practical life applications?
Again, we're getting into self-beliefs and opinions and philosophies. I would like to know, you know, how you came to this conclusion, and you know, maybe more specifically, what move do you think that could not work in a real life situation? And what real life situation? Are we talking multiple attackers with weapons? Yeah, you know, in situations like that, the best thing to do is going to be to find a way to escape. You know, track and field is going to be your first line of defense in a lot of situations, okay? But, you know, if we're talking one-on-one situation, a physical altercation with somebody, you know, a legitimate one-on-one, you know, fight, you're going to be able to utilize almost any move that you have ever utilized in jiu-jitsu, even the flying submission ones. You're going to have to be careful with it. And if you're not super comfortable, I would not do a flying triangle in a street fight or anything like that, but you can triangle people in street fights. You can go upside down guard, arm bar in a street fight. You could heel hook somebody in a street fight. Trust me, okay? I worked my way up to purple belt and then moved on into MMA, and that was you know, we etched that path out, and we were very, that was like a focused path into MMA. And while I was preparing with MMA, it was almost exclusively and entirely in the gi. That's what the best competition was. So that's what we had to do, and it really got me ready for no gi, believe it or not. This kind of goes inside with no. If you want to be good at no gi, why do I have to train gi? All the best no gi guys are all the best gi guys as well. So just be open-minded when you're thinking about like what will work in a street self-defense situation. Anything can happen in the street, and in real life situations. And you're never gonna know where you're gonna be able to bust out one of these moves. So you're limiting yourself if you really think that you can't do these moves in the street. You definitely can. And yeah, there's gonna be like certain moves that are gonna put you, maybe in a vulnerable spot if you're on like gravel or concrete, but really think about that. Really think about like, how is gravel or concrete gonna change anything as you're in here? Really, really think about that stuff, because I do all the time, and I really think that I could do every single thing that I do on the mats, I could do exactly in the streets. Will I get scraped up? Yeah, I'm gonna get scraped up, but I'm gonna smash the other guy's head, with these moves. I don't mean to be all crazy like that, but I'm saying, you should really have the confidence in these moves, because they will work everywhere. And then, these type of movements and these positions that you get yourself in here, they go even beyond self-defense and physical altercations in the real world. Like, you can apply this stuff to you going on your business grind, or you're in your work, if you can tough it out, a lot of the stuff in here, you can tough it out in pretty much any situation in real life. So you can apply it to different things.
What do you think, Phil?
I think the short answer is yes, but and it becomes an argument for fundamentals, because the most advanced black belt world champion in the world defending himself, he doesn't need to do anything high tech.
I think that's a good point. In this,
he's gonna.
he's doing.
Agreed.
Totally agreed.
Rear naked choke,
Totally
right?
agreed. But I always see the comments on YouTube where the guy's doing a berimbolo, or Andres is scooting upside down, hopping on his neck, trying to go, yeah, do that to me in the street and I will kick you in the face. No, you wouldn't. You would not. You wouldn't do that to him. Trust me, you wouldn't.
Yeah, it's like, oh
You
man.
would not do that to him.
Oh, Keenan had to worm guard Buchecha. They're like, man, he had to worm guard Buchecha. Well, that's not going to work on the street.
Yes, it would.
Keenan's not going to worm guard a regular dude on the
He
street.
couldn't do that if he wanted to.
He's just going to take the guy down. That's
Yeah.
my point. I'm saying
You're right.
he's
about
not taking down Buchecha. He's not going to take down like a elite level black belt competitor. But he's going to be able to take a regular guy on the street down and just do day one
That guy's
jiu-jitsu.
wearing a coat, dude. He'll do whatever
It's
he
a
wants to.
matter. It's a matter of context. There's lots of things in all the combat sports that are relevant to self-defense, but the core stuff in all of those things, wrestling, the takedowns, always are good for self-defense. Boxing, I can hit you and not get hit. That's always important. Jiu-jitsu, all the positional hierarchy stuff is 100% relevant and always will be.
I just want to stick up for the new age, techniques that are coming out, and people are like, they're getting into this thing. It's like competition jiu-jitsu, points jiu-jitsu. Look, if you're starting to distinguish jiu-jitsu like that, then your jiu-jitsu is not good enough. But like, I want to tell you right now, a regular person on the street is not going to know what to do when they get grabbed up like this. They're just not going to know what to do. You have to know how to defend those things. And I know people think they can just kick them in the face or something like that. That's way easier said than done.
It's a red herring. Yeah, it's irrelevant.
I think that there's too much of an emphasis on the specific technique and not on the sort of the skill algorithm that a person develops by doing something for a long time.
Yeah.
So, people will say, I'll use one from jiu-jitsu, but it relates to striking as well, where somebody will be like, well, why would you do you can't do an omoplata in a street fight. I mean, let's just say
Right.
That's not going to be your first choice. Well, it's not the omoplata. It's the fact that the people who are able to do omoplatas against trained people who are in shape are probably good at grappling, dealing with a lot of resistance, and they're actually going to be better at dealing with that resistance than the person who is not training with resistance, but might be training quote unquote more realistic techniques. So it's like I'm in, like the stereotypical, like the self-defense seminar where they're not sparring at all.
Right.
That you can learn the most applicable techniques there, but it's not under stress. I'll take the guy who is under stress over the person who practices not under stress any day of the week. So the striking thing that I would say is people like, for example, people think boxing is super effective, and it is, but it's like, oh, well, you can't bob and weave because you'll get kicked, right? If there's kicks allowed and you bob and weave, you'll get kicked. And it's like, yes, if the person is really good, but while you're learning to bob and weave, and the person who learns how to evade strikes by bobbing and weaving has such a good understanding of striking that it's so far beyond a particular technique. You know, it's you're not going to be like, you're not just going to be able to, oh, this guy was boxed for 12 years. Well, if I just kick him, you know, I saw a kick on YouTube. If I just kick him, I got him.
Yeah.
No, you're going to get wrecked.
He's mounted on me, punching me, and I'm going to eye gouge my way out. It's like, no, you're
I mean, yeah, for our academy specifically, the fundamentals curriculum is fundamental, where they're testing on shrimp, bridge, self-defense, get up, and we teach that to the kids. The kids incorporate that every day to their warm-up. Simple things that they need. So shrimping and bridging is to get out from underneath somebody. Self-defense, get up is learning how to fall and then get up safely. So those are the basic things if your plan is just to escape. And then just the other basic things like how to control somebody in the closed guard if you're on bottom, how to get the person over and get on top, how to stabilize the dominant position, different submissions that are effective. You know, your rear naked choke is pretty obvious. So that's all in our fundamentals curriculum for kids and adults. And that's in essence our self-defense. And if you want to go to intermediate, I'd say some of the intermediate curriculum is also applicable for self-defense. And then when you're talking the next tier, if you training things that aren't practical, that's just for the mastery of the sport. So that's, if you want to go past fundamentals, like if you get a phase belt, you should be able to defend yourself a decent amount. And then if you want to keep going to blue belt, intermediate, purple belt, brown belt, black belt, advanced, that's just mastery for the sport, just because you want to train the martial arts. So if you choose that you want to go down that path and you want to be a purple, brown, black belt, jiu-jitsu is so complex and has such a wide variety that, you know, a lot of us, I think jiu-jitsu offers the most freedom because you can develop your own style. You can be a guard player, a takedown person, a guard passer. You can do 10 different guards. You can do 10 different guard passes. There's 10 different takedown systems, and there's a whole bunch of different things. But if you want to master the sport and be a black belt, that's when those unpractical techniques come into play. If you want to just master the sport or want to be a good competitor for people that also know how to do those techniques. So, I mean, that's...
I have a question, because you guys both have kids, right? Mm-hmm. So how does what you recommend for self-defense change based on like the time limit? So let's say I mean, John, your kids are involved like right now. So let's imagine that they weren't, and you just went to, and like, let's say, you know, like Kira's like now in like middle school, and she says, Dad, I wanna learn to defend myself. I wanna learn self-defense. What would you recommend? And imagine she says, I can only train for 1 year. What would you recommend? Would it be any different, or how would you answer that? And I'm curious, same thing for you, even though your children are older.
Yeah, go ahead.
more the same. Jiu-Jitsu fundamentals for just a year. Jiu-Jitsu fundamentals.
Yeah, you know, like, this is a really common question, you know, like, if somebody's going to train long-term or somebody's going to train for a week or like a year or something like that, what are you going to, are you going to show them the same thing? Like if somebody's going to come to me, if she was like, Dad, I want to start doing everything just like you do, then I'm cool. Let's do jiu-jitsu, right? And we're just not even worry about it. It's just going to be something that we do. However, if they're like, you know, Dad, I just kind of want to learn, you know, some self-defense stuff just in case things happen, but I don't want to like get into it or anything like that. I just kind of want to learn some stuff like on the surface level. I would just, you know, an exposure to, you know, the different martial arts at like kind of a basics level, like, you know, boxing, kickboxing, and jiu-jitsu. You know, and you don't really have to get too deep into it. You know, about a year's worth of training sporadically with those mixed in, you're going to be good. And to kind of go off on a tangent here, jiu-jitsu is the only martial art that's going to work on any other martial art. It's the only martial art that deals with guard. So the second that you sit to your butt, that person who's now standing up has to figure out how to deal with that. You know, yes, kick and punch, all right? But that's assuming that they're going to land a knockout blow on that first time that they connect. After that, then they're going to have to really figure out how to deconstruct and unlock your guard. and also your goal in jiu-jitsu, and the reason why I was like, if my daughter was like, Dad, I want to be just like you, I just want to do jiu-jitsu, then cool, just start there. Because when you get good at jiu-jitsu, kind of like Vannessa was saying, and you go up through the ranks, you know, at a certain point, you're going to be able to show up to any combat grappling type of tournament, judo, jiu-jitsu, freestyle wrestling, folk style. You're going to be like, what's the rule set? You know, what are we doing? Gi, no gi, freestyle wrestling, folk style wrestling. I mean, if you got mastery level in jiu-jitsu, you will be able to go in there and rock and roll with anybody in there. So, if you were just going to be if you're doing like a short period of time, I would say incorporate some striking stuff. You know, maybe even some Krav Maga. Learn how to kick people in the balls and poke them in the eye and run away. That's going to be pertinent. If you're just training for a month, yeah, do that. You're probably going to get more out of just some quick exposure to stuff. Okay, mount, close guard, how to get up, so self-defense get-ups, you know. But if you're in it for the long haul, if you want a long-term relationship, I would just, you know, really focus in on gi jiu-jitsu and don't worry about if is this applicable in the street when the guy's on top of me. You don't know until that happens. That's why I'm like, I think any jiu-jitsu position at all can conceivably be realistic in the street.
So going back to the 1 year scenario, what would be the breakdown that you would recommend striking versus grappling for your daughter if you could only train for a year?
I would do 6 months of grappling and then I would end with 6 months of striking.
Okay. And within striking, would you do Muay Thai, boxing, or doesn't matter?
I would do 3 months of boxing first to get comfortable with the hands, and then incorporate the kicks in the last 3 months.
Okay. Would she have to spar? If she was like, I want to be pretty confident.
We would start to experiment with sparring that last 3 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have any?
No, that's a good mix. I mean, you could do it 6 months of jiu-jitsu, 6 months of striking, or you could intermix it.
Yeah,
you know?
three.
I don't think it matters too much.
Change it out every 3 months or something.
Okay, cool. Thank you.